A to Z Mysteries, Book Number 8, The Haunted Hotel, by Ron Roy. Chapter 7. By 9 the next morning, the three families were down in the lobby. Ruth Rose's parents had treated them all to breakfast at Ellie's diner. Then they'd walked back to the hotel for their luggage. While the adults thanked Mr. Linkletter and the Spivetses, the kids huddled on the sofa. Mr. and Mrs. Spivets are selling the hotel today. Ruth Rose pulled the white hair from her pocket. This proves that someone is just pretending to be the ghost, she said, but we don't know who or why. Maybe one of the guests has white hair, Josh said. Josh, all the guests are gone, except Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers, and they both have dark hair, Ruth Rose reminded him. Could the hair be from a wig? Dink asked. The ghost could have been wearing a costume and makeup. That's it, Josh cried. Last night I smelled makeup in the hall. I remember the yucky smell from last Halloween. Just then, Mr. Linkletter walked over to the kids. He looked even more unhappy than he had the day before. This is a sad day, Mr. Linkletter said. Each rail and rook will be here at noon with the papers. Noon! Ruth Rose jumped up. Then we still have 3 hours. Mr. Linkletter gazed down at her. I'm afraid it's too late. He shook his head and walked away. We have to find out who's pretending to be the ghost, Ruth Rose said. If we don't, Olivia and Mr. Linkletter will lose their jobs. And Mr. and Mrs. Spivets will lose their home, Dink added. Guys, I think I know who the ghost is, Josh said. Dink and Ruth Rose stared at him. Well, Dink said. Who? The only people left in the hotel are Livy, Mr. Linkletter, and his aunt and uncle, right? Right, Ruth Rose said. And we know that none of them want the hotel to be torn down, Josh continued. You forgot about Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers, Dink said. They're still here. Josh grinned. Bingo! The Jefferses? Ruth Rose said. But they said they saw the ghost outside their room. Sure they saw the ghost, Josh said. One of them is the ghost. I know how we can find out, Dink said. We have to search their room. Mr. Linkletter will never let us do that, Josh said. Well, maybe he won't let us, but I know someone who might, Ruth Rose said. Who? Asked Dink. Livy. The kids said goodbye to their families, then hurried to the door that led to the basement. They found Livy in a cozy room, drinking a cup of tea. She was wearing her maid's uniform. Morning, kids, she said. What brings you down here? We saw the ghost last night, Ruth Rose said. Livy's eyes widened. Really? Where? Tell me. The kids explained about spending the night in the hotel and hiding in the cleaning closet. It was so creepy, Josh said. First, we heard all these weird noises, then this thing came out of nowhere. It glowed, Ruth Rose said. She showed Livy the white hair, and we found this. We think the ghost is one of the guests wearing a costume and wig, Dink explained. Suddenly, Livy let out a gasp. It was a wig, she cried. What was? Ruth Rose asked. I just remembered, Livy said. Yesterday I was in 301 getting ready to vacuum. When I looked under the bed for shoes and stuff, I saw this hairy white thing. I thought it was a rat, but it could have been a white wig. Who's in room 301? Dink asked. Livy shrugged. I don't know their name, but they're a nice couple from New York. Could you let us in so we could check the room for clues? Ruth Rose asked. Livy shook her head. Sorry, but you know how Mr. Linkletter is about the guests' privacy. But Mr. and Mrs. Pivets hired us to get rid of the ghost, Dink said. Besides, if they have to sell the hotel, you and Mr. Linkletter will lose your jobs. And Mr. and Mrs. Pivets will have to move, Ruth Rose added. Please, Livy, it won't take us long. Livy took a moment to think. Okay, she finally said, but just for 2 minutes. Hey, what's this? Josh had stuck his head into a small opening in one wall. That's an old dumbwaiter, Livy explained. In the old days, the hotel sent food up to the guests. Each room had one of these little elevator things. When the food got up there, the guests just opened a door and pulled out their food tray. Our room didn't have one, Dink said. None of them do anymore, Livy said. When the hotel closed its kitchen, the dumb waiters were all sealed up. She pointed to the one in her wall. That's the only hole left. Josh stuck his head back into the opening. Cool, this thing goes way up. Right, Livy explained. The shaft is still there, but the openings into the rooms were covered over. Josh yelled, Hello! Into the empty shaft. His voice came echoing back. Livy finished her tea. Okay, let's go, she said. I'll be glad when Mr. Linkletter is back to normal again. He's even grouchier than usual. Livy took the kids up to the 3rd floor, then knocked at room 301. When no one answered, she unlocked the door and pushed it open. Please don't touch anything, she said. She knelt down and peeked under both beds. The wig's gone. The kids looked around the room. Maybe it's in the closet, Ruth Rose whispered. Livy pulled open the closet door. On the top shelf sat a plastic head wearing a spiky white wig. That's it, Josh said. Can you take it down? Dink asked. Livy carefully took the head down and set it on a table. Ruth Rose removed the white hair from her pocket and held it next to the wig. The hairs are the same, she said. Chapter 8. Look! Dink pointed to a small framed picture on the bedside table. Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers. You know these people? Livy asked. We met them yesterday, Ruth Rose said. We think one of them might be the ghost. Livy's eyes grew wide. Why would they want to scare the guests away? They seem so nice. That's what we plan to find out, Dink said. Livy carefully placed the wig back on the closet shelf. As she stepped back, her arm caught on something. A long silver object clunked to the floor. It's the ghost's sword, Ruth Rose said. She picked it up and laughed. It's just painted wood. Guys, look at this stuff. Josh had been examining some tubes and bottles on a vanity table. Look, white clown makeup. And black. This is what I smelled in the hallway last night. Hey guys, a tape recorder, Ruth Rose said. Kids, please don't touch. Before Livy could finish, Ruth Rose had pushed the play button. Suddenly, the room was filled with spooky noises. Livy and the kids listened as a voice moaned and groaned. Those are the same noises we heard last night, Dink said. Have you seen Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers this morning? Ruth Rose asked Livy. Livy shook her head. Maybe they went out for breakfast. She looked at her watch. And I have to get busy. Livy locked the door behind them, and they all got in the elevator. Thanks for letting us in, Ruth Rose said to Livy. Livy put one finger to her lips. Let's keep this a secret, okay? She whispered. From you-know-who. It's a deal, Ruth Rose whispered back. The elevator door opened, and Livy left the kids in the lobby. There's Mr. Linkletter, Josh said. Maybe he knows where Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers went. The kids walked over to the front desk. Mr. Linkletter looked as if he hadn't been to bed. His suit was rumpled, and his hair stuck up in the back. "Maybe we shouldn't disturb him," Ruth Rose whispered. "But we have to find Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers," Dink said. "We don't have much more time." Dink walked up to the desk and put on his best smile. "Hi, Mr. Linkletter." Mr. Linkletter gazed down at Dink. "Oh, hello," he said. "Do you happen to know where Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers are this morning?" he asked. Mr. Linkletter waved his hand toward the door. "They told me they were going to Ellie's for breakfast." "Thanks, Mr. Linkletter," Dink said. The kids left the hotel and hurried up Main Street toward Ellie's diner. "What are we gonna say to them?" Josh asked. "We can't just walk up and accuse them of being the ghost, can we?" Ruth Rose pushed open the door to the diner. "Don't worry," she said. "I have a plan." Ellie was behind the counter, mixing tuna salad in a big bowl. She waved as the kids sat in one of the booths. "There they are," Josh whispered. He nodded his head toward another booth, where Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers were eating breakfast. "They look so nice," Dink said. "Not like people who would try to ruin a hotel." Ellie came to their booth. "Back so soon?" she asked, opening her pad. "Don't tell me you're having another breakfast." "Can I borrow your pad and a pencil?" Ruth Rose asked. Ellie gave Ruth Rose a sly smile and handed them over. "What are you kids up to?" she asked. "I'll give them back in a minute," Ruth Rose said. "Okie dokie, I'll see you in a minute then," Ellie said, heading back to her tuna salad. Ruth Rose began writing. "What are you doing?" Josh asked. "Wait a sec," Ruth Rose said. She finished and pushed the pad in front of Dink and Josh. "What do you think?" "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers, we know all about the white wig and the tape recorder. Guess who?" "Ruth Rose, what if we're wrong about the Jefferses?" Dink asked. "We're not wrong," Ruth Rose said, getting up. She walked over to Ellie, said something to her, and handed her the pad. Ellie smiled at Ruth Rose, then headed for the Jefferses' booth. Ruth Rose hurried back and sat down. "Now watch," she told Dink and Josh. They watched as Ellie handed the note to Mrs. Jeffers. Mrs. Jeffers read the note, then said something to Ellie. Ellie pointed toward the kids. Mrs. Jeffers waved and Ruth Rose waved back. "Come on," Ruth Rose said. She walked over to the Jefferses' booth. Dink and Josh were right behind her. "Hi," Ruth Rose said, pulling the white hair from her pocket. "I think your wig got caught on the fire door last night. You left this." She placed the white hair on the green placemat. Mrs. Jeffers stared at the hair, then at the kids. Finally, she looked at her husband. Mr. Jeffers sighed, then grinned at the kids. "Looks like you got us," he said.